More field stabilized. Want to turn up the heat. We gotta
move. Today, or maybe it was yesterday, Davey came out on the forums and was talking about the change to Terran that he wants to do, and that's of course putting the Hellbat upgrade back on the factory tech lab to help out early game ZvT. So we'll throw this to CatZ first. Is this going to do a whole lot?
Oh, I got a lot to say, man.
Well, let's talk about this, and then we can branch off.
Okay, no, I got a lot to say about this as well.
Oh, okay, sure.
I mean, like for starters, do you have the quote that David? Could you read that?
Yeah, which part? I have it up right now.
Shit.
If you full screen the stream, you can read it.
The biggest. Start at the biggest issue and just read that paragraph.
Okay, I'll narrate for you, CatZ. The biggest issue in ZvT early game at the highest pro level seems to be the mass Hellion contained, leading into the various potential mass Hellbat combinations right when the armory comes into play. The time between Terran gaining full map control and then converting all their map control units into straight-up power units looks to be too narrow.
Okay, so he starts saying that he's been trying to talk and reach out to pro gamers and whatnot, and then he says that, right? He states that the biggest problem with CVT is Hellion contained into Hellbat timings. So I'm like, well, what the fuck? I've actually never seen this happen before. It surprises me a little bit that this is the biggest problem because I thought I was playing all of the right people. So I was pretty unhappy about it. And then I went on to ask other people, other respectable players. I would think DRG and Stefano and Yu-Gi-Oh and other players that might be playing at a higher level Heart of the Storm, and I'm like, maybe I'm just not matching up against against Polt, but then I'm like, wait, but I am, and he's not doing that shit. So so it really pisses me off that they lie, because it feels like a lie to me. It feels like they're fixing an issue that is, as much as it may help and it may be part of the problem, it's not the whole thing. So I guess that's what I had to say in regards to that specific thing, and then we can go into the issue in itself.
Yeah, I don't think Dan or,
to say about, so.
I don't think Dan or Kevin are going to argue what you said. So
yeah, to be fair, I've watched as much beta as I possibly can. Although I haven't been playing much Zerg, I haven't seen that strategy at all.
It's a pretty common one, or at least within the group of people that I practice with. It's like a CC first into Reactor Hellion and then 3 barracks. Pol used to do a similar timing in Wings of Liberty with 3 tech labbed barracks and it'd be a Marauder Hellion push. But the only difference is you add an armory, so it's a Marauder Hellbat push.
Okay,
I'm
so
not sure.
Marauder, I brought this, I read this whole thing to a bunch of players. Only Root Vibe, my teammate, said that this was an actual problem for him, that this timing existed. And
I'm
yeah,
pretty
all the
surprised
players
with
that I mentioned, more too, Sasquatch himself, that's your teammate, right? So I'm guessing you play with him. Brett, I just asked so many players, and there was one player that had a problem with it, but he wouldn't even call it the biggest problem that there is in CVT.
No,
so,
I don't think it is. I was more just trying to say that I think this build and timing does exist. Obviously, there are larger issues.
Well, it has to exist. You can't have just rolled dice to make up a strategy. All right, so what is the biggest problem, CatZ, in ZvT right now?
Holy shit!
Well, hold on. Is that change actually going to do anything before we open up that can of worm, Dan?
That helps. Yeah, it helps with that one timing, I guess.
Yep. And
I've never seen.
Well, it helps. Well, if you think about it, yeah, because if you only have the one factory and you want it reactored, and now you have to go to a tech lab and get the upgrade, then you're going to have less Hellbats, and it is going to be slower. So, I mean, it's obviously going to help. It is a slight nerf to the Hellbat.
It's going to completely remove Hellbat drops, I think.
I think you're probably right. Yeah, Hellbat drops between that and the 2 for thing, they have to be gone, pretty much.
Yeah.
I don't really like how Blizzard does that sometimes, and they've done it a lot, where, like, if you nerf something once, okay, cool. But, like, why do they have to nerf it 3 or 4 times? They did this numerous times in the beta where they would find, like, a problematic issue, and then instead of changing one part of it, they would change, like, every single part of it. I'm not saying Hellbat are
I mean, if they do it one thing at a time, I think it's fine. Like, what they did with the Reaper, it's a completely different issue, because they kind of changed the Reaper, like, 3 different things, and it's like, okay, like, here's a new unit. But with the Hellbat, like, they first nerfed the medevac thing, and now they're nerfing this, and it's still too good of a unit, so...
I guess this isn't as applicable, what I was saying, because in the past they would do them all in the same patch.
Yeah. Yeah, that annoys me as well. It's like, yeah, show us one thing at a time, and then, you know, see how it goes.
Yeah,
I'm fine with that.
Basically, Hellbat drops will be completely one base all in. Like, there may be some kind of one base Hellbat play, but you're not going to be able to, like, Hellbat drop and expand behind it with the upgrade, and it's going to hit way later. Like, it shouldn't really be a thing anymore, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So, back to my question.
I think we can go to the question now, Dan.
What is the biggest problem, ZvT CatZ? In your opinion?
Okay. Can I talk for a while?
You can talk all night.
I think QXC is going to be jumping in, but go ahead.
Feel free to jump in, Kevin.
Sure.
I wish I had like a glass of whiskey right here. I sit here and watch what is about to unfold.
Yeah, I'll sit back and drink it for you, Dan.
Yeah, the problem with the Hellbats isn't that they're like that the Hellbat drop is too good. Like, that, how stupid is that? The problem with the Hellbats is that the unit in itself is too cost efficient. Like, and here's like the thing about Hellbats. They cost 100 minerals and no gas. You can make 2 at a time. I wrote a lot of shit down. The weaknesses it has, right? It's easily kiteable by ranged units like stalkers and whatnot. But it doesn't really matter in massive engagements now, does it? Like, if you had Hellions before and now you have Hellbats with your army, it's like a million times better. It doesn't matter if you're kiting part of the army, because the other half of the army is doing damage still. So it's not even worth kiting in that position. So when you compare Hellions,
I don't really agree with that, because it's like, if you're kiting a mech army with Hellbats, you should be out of range of everything except for, like, you should be able to attack the Hellbats without being in range of anything else. And if the tanks are siege, I mean, if the tanks are siege, then you're not really kiting the Hellbats. Like, you're
exactly. You have to engage the mech army at one point, and it doesn't matter if the Hellbats are slow or not at that point.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with that, but continue.
I mean, if you don't agree with it, you can say why, and that'll be fine.
I just think Hellbats are very easily kiteable. They have 2.25 movement speed. Roaches on creep have over 3. Like,
roaches out of creep and without the upgrade have the same speed.
Yeah, but you never talk about roaches off creep without the upgrade.
Yeah,
that's not even relevant to the discussion.
So like, roaches with the upgrade and on creep have 3. But then Hellbats can also turn into Hellions, which have 4.20 or something ridiculous.
Sure, but Hellions don't do anything in they're not Hellbat form. Like, you can kill a bunch of Hellions with almost any Zerg army you're making, except for Speedlings.
I mean, Terran still made Hellions though before, right? It's like, I understand it was probably the only option for minerals only that you could do with a mech army, but like, Hellbats are just a lot better than them. So like, let me finish comparing them. They have 135. Like, if you compare like a Hellbat, like, would you rather have a Zealot or a Hellbat? 2 Marines or a Hellbat, or Lynx or a Hellbat? Even 1 Roach or a Hellbat, right? In a straight-up engagement, maybe the Roach fares okay.
The Roach does win in a straight-on engagement, but the Roach is a notoriously poor unit supply for supply, and that's a fact in every matchup, in every situation, just because it's 2 supply. It's a unit that really should be like 1.5 supply for how good it is. Or for how bad it is, or whatever.
Well, yeah, but that would be problematic in other ways. But the Roach is like a really funny unit, and you can't just make Roaches all the time. So I mean, I feel like that's neither here nor there. Like, obviously you have to have them now against Terran to actually defend against this crap. But I think a big problem that I see with a lot of Zergs is how do you transition out of having roaches? Because you have to get a certain number of upgrades for them, and like you can't really make them all game long because eventually they are so crap.
Yeah,
they get better. They get better in Heart of the Swarm because of the Viper. Yeah, you know, roaches and hydras. Like against mech, roaches are actually better. Like I'm not trying to be completely biased here. Like, but like when you compare like Hellbats to roaches, it's like 145 HP against 135. Now roaches are armored, so and this is a unit that costs gas as well, right? Which is a more precious resource. Worse than light, because roaches take extra damage from immortals, stalkers, void rays, marauders, and tanks. While Hellbats only take damage from banelings, like extra damage, and that's it. And that's in the only matchup.
Sure, but if roaches were light, then I could actually just make Hellions and kill them.
Okay. That's not my point. Why aren't Hellbats...
Why aren't Hellbats armored?
Yeah, sure.
I don't think that would change TvZ at all.
Yeah,
what would
it wouldn't
you
change TvZ, but it would still like help PvT, I guess.
Well, Hellbats aren't a huge issue, I don't think, in PvT, to be honest.
That's because you haven't seen my PvT yet.
Thanks, Kevin.
I don't know, man. Like, Hellbats are the least of my worries in that matchup.
Like, the other thing is that Hellbats can get healed, which is ridiculous. Yeah. Like
it's really strong.
Yeah, it's so strong. Like in 2v2, me and Drury had a strategy where I would make roaches, he would make medevacs, and it was broken, right? But, like you can do that as Terran. So that's actually one of the things that DRG, like when I asked DRG what he thought, like I was like, is this a problem for you? And he was like, no. For me, the biggest problems is that Hellbats can get healed by medevacs, and that Rippers are fucking imba, is what he said, fucking in all caps. But yeah, then Hellbats have higher DPS than roaches, which I find stupid because they also have AoE.
Well, that's part of like what Terran is, having high DPS on everything. So.
Yeah, but that's because their units are like mech units are usually more expensive and whatnot, and like
where they have like really low health, like a Marine.
Yeah, exactly.
DPS with like really fragile.
Yeah, Hellbats are too tanky and do too much, I think. So I think that's the problem with Hellbats. Like I think the unit needs to be reworked. I wouldn't mind Hellbat drops if the medevac drop in them couldn't heal them, and you know they didn't, like maybe if they had 100 HP instead of 135, I'd be perfectly fine with that. So, I think that would. So the change that I was thinking of, right? Here's the change. Right now, Hellbats do 9 DPS plus 6 versus light. If they switch that around and they put 6.
Oh, 6 plus 6 DPS versus light. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, it's 9 DPS against everything and plus 6 versus light. I think if they changed it to 6 DPS and plus 9 versus light, that would be a lot better, because then they would still, you know, you would get Hellbats to counter light units, which is what they intended to. But they wouldn't be good against they wouldn't be ridiculous against everything else.
That's before we discuss that, I want to go back to your point about comparing their DPS. I guess the one thing is, if you compare, they only have slightly higher. Like when I think of the Hellbat, the obvious units to compare it to are the Roach and the Zealot, because those are both around the same cost. They're both 2 supply. They're both kind of like tanky, low-range fighters. Mm-hmm. And basically with the Hellbat, when you compare it to the Roach, you have a unit that has 2 less range, similar DPS against non-armored. Hellbat only has 1 more than a Roach. Higher DPS against light, similar DPS against not light. The Hellbat has higher DPS against light, which is questionable. And then the Roach has 2 more range. And in my head, like the way I look at it is, Blizzard says the Hellbat has 2 less range than a Roach, so we'll give it Splash. Like that's kind of the way it works in my head, like as they're trying to balance it. And like if you compare it to the Zealot, it's like the Zealot is better against not targets, and the Hellbat is better against light targets, but the Zealot is also much faster once you get charge. And so they give the Hellbat Splash. I'm not saying it's good right now. I'm just trying to like explain, especially for the viewers.
Empathize with David Kim.
No, I want to give you guys like a perspective on why the Hellbat has the stats that it does. I'm not saying that they're good stats. I'm just saying like this seems to be the logic for them.
Yeah, I understand most of that. Like that's why I'm saying I don't have a problem with them in so much in the, like, you know, they are kiteable by ranged units. So if you get ranged units, then that's what you have to do against Hellbats. It makes for shitty gameplay because you can't open links anymore. But hey, fuck it. That's how they decided to balance it. That's fine. But then in straight up engagements, they're just too strong and too beefy. So I think I agree with you partly, but I think that they really need to make some small changes to the Hellbat that would really, like, if like go back. You said you would go back to what I was saying. So like the change that I proposed.
Recommended change. I think it's interesting. I'm not sure. I have a hard time overcoming my Terran bias because I'm picturing how that would affect. I think it really only affects TvZ, to be honest, because against Protoss, if you're using Hellbats to kill anything besides Zealots, you're probably doing it wrong anyway. Mm-hmm. And nobody really cares about mirror matchups anyway, so.
Right.
I don't actually think Hellbats are even an issue in TvT because the kiting. This is a small tangent. The kiting in TvT, Hellions are like 100 times better than Hellbats in TvT, because the Hellbats never ever do damage, and the Hellions do bonus to them. But anyway, back to your point. I guess it's just a question of should the Hellbat be good against not light units?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know. It is right now. It is like quite good against that.
Yeah.
Well, that makes it kind of good against everything. I want to know how they actually come up with these numbers, because I don't know if, because I know you guys both played some StarCraft 1, but I remember in StarCraft 1, once somebody told me about how if you look at the way that they divide up the numbers, the spore colony and the missile turret were exactly the same numerically. Like they... And I wonder how they come up with these numbers, because that made me think of it, what you were saying, QXC, with, you know, how, okay, well, the numbers are actually similar for these three units that are all kind of tanky, you know, early, easy to get units, but then they have, like, their special abilities. So I'm just wondering, like, because there is some set of numbers that they use to try to balance an RTS game. It's like, like, it blew my mind when I saw that, like, you can actually look at the resources lost tab, and that actually means something in StarCraft 2. Like, oh my God, how do they get these numbers to line up like this when the economies function so differently, and like you can have different numbers of bases and shit like that. Like that blew my mind. So I wonder how they're actually coming up with these numbers. Because
I always thought like maybe they have some kind of formula that they use to start, where it'd be like
they have to. They did in StarCraft 1, so I guess they carried that over or something, but. The Hellbat, with like the splash damage and the hit points and how it is good against these other units, I feel like maybe they're relying too much on like you have to micro against this, which isn't as realistic, even though the numbers may line up kind of for its special ability of being slow but having that splash damage. You know what I'm trying to say? This is like actually really difficult to say.
I understand what you're saying. It's like it's like maybe in the formula, having a movement speed of 2.25 for what is essentially a melee unit, a 2-range unit, gives you these DPS. And when you give it area of effect damage, then the DPS is like that comes out of the unit somewhere. And maybe it's like it has slow movement speed and the compensation is the area of effect.
Yeah.
But like a lot of this stuff, it's like how do you put area of effect into a formula?
No, exactly.
Is area of effect equal to 2 DPS? Is it equal to 0.5 movement speed? I mean,
or it seems like the healing is like an equivalent to like the burrow or something like that, but that just doesn't work in a straight up engagement.
Yeah, it's definitely different. But like the Hellbat is the least tanky of the Zealot and the Roach. It is also of those three, it's the only one that doesn't start with base armor. And so maybe those also contribute to the higher DPS that we see in the area of effect.
Yeah. I think if Hellbats couldn't get healed by medevacs, or even if they nerfed the heal a little bit, like, you know, if or like it drains twice the energy or it heals half the amount, it would be a lot better.
Yeah, I think that those are actually like much more realistic changes to like nerf the healing amount. But then like some guy made a post about how funny it is, all the different rules of the Hellbat. And when you're trying to make like 3 pages of different rules for one unit. Is this unit right for the game, really? Like, it has this many different crazy things?
Yeah.
You know, like, right now, outside of the Hellbat, if you want it to do different things, it's things like, okay, make it armored, or make it psionic, or do this or that, like, which is just like code words that we have at the bottom, as opposed to, like, what is there going to be a new code word that says Hellbat, which means that, you know, it's like psionic Hellbat type, you know, like armored unit, where, like, now it doesn't fit in the medevac like you think it will, and won't be healed normal, and I don't know, it feels like the amount of reworking that we're doing to it makes it not fit all that well, which is kind of like the reason they took the Warhound out is because it just made mech into a bio ball where you just walk around the map with it.
And kill everything.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that's what it is right now with the Hellbat, but it's kind of, it's in the same vein as the Warhound in certain ways, where it's like, well, this thing is like really tough and kind of just walks around and don't get in its way, and like it had, you know, we're trying to fix it with all these ridiculous rules that I don't know if this is the right way to go about this.
Dan, we're 3 weeks out, right, from Heart of the Swarm launching. Do you see them realistically removing the Hellbat?
No, I don't think it'll be removed. I don't think it has to be removed.
I agree with Dan. I don't think it needs to be removed.
Me neither.
And even with, I mean, there's definitely a lot of room for changes. I don't really understand why Warhound was removed. I felt like they didn't really try a whole lot of things to balance it.
Well, it was because it was, like, I actually talked to them about this, and they said it was it just kind of made mech into the bio ball. Yeah, it was like boring. It didn't really fit with what mech is supposed to be, which is immobile. But which makes sense, because that thing could run at the speed of a speedling on creep with a Mutalisk pulling it or something, and then like had more range than every unit in the game. And
well, it was completely broken. That's quite obvious.
It was so stupid, like, that you would make it against Zerg even though it doesn't have fucking mechanical units. So, I mean, oh my god, what a dumb unit. But I actually enjoyed playing against it. The Hellbat is, there's no finesse to a Hellbat, right? There's finesse to Hellions. Yeah, like, you have to actually be on top of your Hellions. Yeah, they have like low health. Like, Lings can counter them if you use Lings right. But what finesse is there in a Hellbat? You have a bunch of them in front of your shit.
But like, what finesse is there with Zealots or like Ultralists? Like, those are both just big tanky A moves.
That is true. There isn't a lot of finesse, but Terran units
even
overall
Thors.
have finesse.
Like, there's actually zero finesse with making a ball of Thors and A-moving your
now there is. Now you can click the thingy to destroy birdlords. So there's your
That's
finesse.
a lot of finesse, wow.
Yep. So, yeah. Well, that was my starting point on CVT. Reapers are clearly a big problem in CVT right now.
I love this transition. So that's where we started now. All right, go ahead. I want to hear it.
So, this is like what DRG has the most problem with, and it's something that I like talked about when they made the change on my stream a little bit, because the biggest problem with Reapers is that it's up to the Terran player to do damage, and not so much the Zerg player to defend or repel that damage, in my opinion. Like, if you are going, and this is a big if, of course, but if you're going like for a hatch first, which is the standard in CVT, and shouldn't have to change, in my opinion, because the Terran has the option to make one unit. And even if it did, it doesn't change that much. But the Reaper will always, like, if you go for a proxy Reaper, like 11 Reaper, the Reaper, like, you'll have 2 Reapers in your base because before you can have a Queen. You have Lings, which can't ever catch a Reaper on or off creep until you have Speed, which is much later. You can't have anything that can ever catch, surround, or beat a Reaper. So it's completely up to the Terran's multitasking to see how many drones they can kill, or if they can snatch a Queen, how fast they are, or how good they are at controlling and moving around the Reaper, and how good they are at multitasking and coming back with the Reaper to do more damage. So I think that a player with amazing multitasking, like maybe Flash or Innovation, for example, like, if they can't not be cost efficient with Reapers, and that just bothers me.
I don't agree that the Zerg player... You make it sound like the Zerg player literally just sits there and waits for Reapers to kill their drones. Like, the way the good Zergs that I play against defend against proxy Reaper is you send drones, 3 or 4 drones to attack the Reapers, and that forces.
Yeah, the
basically,
Reaper can run away, but it can still run towards the drone that you're trying to micro back and kill it.
Sure, but
that's what the good turrets I play against do. So
it's not just like the Zerg player does nothing. Like you have to micro back the injured drones. If you notice you have one of your drones is low on health, you can take like 3 or 4 and stack them on top of a mineral patch, and it becomes almost impossible to click on the drone that you want. Like it's just a point where you don't have a lot of options, but there's still defensive things you can do, and then you transition into something else. I mean, once you have speed, the Reapers basically go away.
I mean, that's fine, but you do understand the frustration that you can't actually control the outcome, right? Like I do pull like 4 or 5 drones, chase the Reaper away, but then still, like the Reaper, if it's much faster than anything off of creep, it can still pick off a drone or 2. And then come back and do more damage. It's ridiculous.
I mean, okay, sure, but most of these builds are either an 8-8 or a 10-10. Like, it's not like Terran's sitting on this gigantic economy behind this build. They have maybe 6 or 7 SCVs mining minerals to make this happen. And so, like, I'm not saying that Proxy Reaper is a reasonable strategy. What I'm saying is, if Terran is to invest this much into the strategy, it seems reasonable that he should be able to kill 1 or 2 drones, or 3 drones, because you're sitting on 16 to 18 drones, and Terran has 8 to 9 SCVs on minerals.
Okay, then I see the Reaper. I'm forced to drop my gas right away, or the Terran can go 3cc right like behind it and do whatever they want. It's just insane. Like, the Terran has complete control when you go for 1 Rex, like a Reaper harass. It's like you have maximum scouting potential. Like, it's just frustrating. Like, there's nothing I can do that you can't see. I can't control how much damage you do, and then I can go for speed and try for a bailing bust, and it works a lot of the time because you're fucking going for 3 CCs behind it. But if it doesn't, if you have a mine, then I'm fucked. I mean,
I think the scouting is probably, at least as a Terran player, the scouting is much more important to the utility of the Reaper than the damage you do, except when you go for 8-8 proxy or 10-10 proxy. But any other Reaper build, it's about the information that you get, and it's like there just isn't another unit that has that potential to get that much information that early in the game.
Well, I don't know how much information there is to gather. Once they see Reapers, they actually are forced onto a certain route. And the one thing I don't like about some of these early Terran strategies, like the Hellbat makes it so you can't go Lings, and the Reaper makes it so you have to get speed immediately. That combos reasonably well. Okay, right? It does, and like forcing, like as soon as you force someone, you're like, ha, you have to make roaches now.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, that's not so dissimilar from like a CC first 2-fact blue flame. If you don't make roaches against that, the game ends.
Yeah, I mean,
yes,
that's true, but
if
that's also much more that you're putting in there. Like,
yeah, like if
the Terran is putting more effort into that.
Sure. I mean, after the armory change, I think the armory Hellbat change, you'll see a lot more Ling openings because it's going to be a lot harder to get that.
Yeah, well, definitely.
The Reaper seems like a perfect opening against Zerg. Like, unless you want to do something a little bit cheeky, why would you not open Reaper? I feel like if we compare it economically, just a standard Reaper in your base even, I feel like a Reaper opening where you go up to 3 or 4 Reapers maybe and micro it well and just go command center behind it, like it's not too fast or anything. Is there any reason to ever not do that?
I mean, maybe if your opponent is really good at defending it.
Or if they're metagaming you.
Yeah, I suppose like that.
There are some builds that Reaper does not do well against.
Like, yeah. Like, if you proxy Rex Reaper me, I'll hatching your base and kill you. Like, you can't do anything about it.
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that's
all the Zergs that I've seen trying to actually counter something like the proxy Reaper, just, I mean, the best way that I've seen is something like just send 10 Lings across the map, and then their Reapers have to go chase Lings all day, But
that one's, I mean, that's
They
kind of
also
like
they also force 4 lings out, Kevin, which is 2 more drones that the Zerg doesn't make.
Yep.
Like at least 4, right? So I don't know. I feel like it's too strong of an opener. But anyways, that's another option that Terran has, right? Then there's mines.
Oh, I love this. This is so fun.
I think mines are great defensively. I don't think they're overpowered. I think they're, but the thing is, it makes it really hard to surprise the Terran, right? You can't, like, it's almost impossible to hold in Terrans in Heart of the Storm, because of mines, because of tanks not having to get siege, basically those two really. But yeah, like mines are really good reactively. Like if you rush for a Muta and you're like you go proxy fucking Spire and you're being all fancy and no one expects it, then Muta show up in your base. Well, he can make 2 mines in an instant and basically not take that much damage, where in Wings of Liberty that would be game over. So I think mines are nice. I think it's something that Terran perhaps needed to some extent. I think a lot of Terrans try to like do this mine pushes and shit that in my opinion is kind of bad, or even mine contains seems kind of cost inefficient. But I think they're great defensively, and I think they're good in like maxed out armies if you just make a few, and also if the Zerg is going for a ling heavy style, of course.
I actually don't think they're very good with a maxed out army, because in my head, I think the supply would just be better used elsewhere. Like in my head, the way I imagine mines being used to the highest efficiency is when Zerg doesn't know where they are. Because that's when the micro mistakes happen, where a bunch of roaches all take a big mine shot, or an infestor dies, or a viper dies, or like the really important stuff. But as long as Zerg knows where your mines are, they send 1 ling in or 1 roach in, and then they kill it, or they attack with overwhelming numbers so that the mine doesn't go off. And that's been my experience a lot when I use my mines in front of my army. Zerg sees
but
it.
But you can't. Okay, maybe you can send 1 roach, but it's still paying for itself, right? Like I mean, you can never send 1 ling or any number of lings that will not that will activate the mine when there's an army around it, because it has that delay thingy.
Yeah, except the mine, usually you can kill them. Like once you get 120, 150 supply army, you can kill the mines before they go off just by A-moving. Unless you get a lot of them, in which case I feel like, and again, this is my personal experience, I just feel like your army is not very mobile. So unless you're planning to turtle into Sky or turtle into a big timing, like if you invest 20 or 30 supply into mines, you're just not.
Oh, that's a lot. Yeah,
pushing.
That's a lot of supply. No, I meant much less than that. But either way, I think that mines have their place in the game. I think they're good units. It bothers a lot of like Zerg players, but really, I think it's something that you have to get used to, sort of. What does bother me about mines though, and Hellbats, is that it makes for things like Cell Warpins or Ling Rumbais a lot less viable, and I think that makes for less interesting play.
Good point, yeah.
Maybe that's just me.
I agree with the Ling Rumbais. I've seen Widow Mines kill like just huge amounts of Lings and Banelings. Zealot Warpins, I don't think it's really a problem there.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, that's the mines against Protoss are a completely different beast from against Zerg. But what I'm concerned about against Zerg is the fact that they have this fancy new Mutalisk, and I'd love to see Mutas make a comeback from Terran, and I think they would, but if you have a mine on the side of your base and a flock of Mutas gets hit by that, then you're like, oh, well, I guess you're better than me, and then you leave the game. Like, really, that's what it comes down to, because they do so much damage, the Mutas are now useless. So, and the Mutas have to be clumped to go into the Terran base. You're not going to go in spread out like a magic box. Like, then the turrets will kill you. It's like, here's my biggest problem with Zerg versus Terran right now. There are so many new weapons for Terran.
Yeah.
What does Zerg have, especially in the early game? Zerg has gained nothing in the early game aside from
burrow and
some funny burrow.
Yeah.
Some funny burrow rushes, and yeah, they can scout better now, which actually was really smart of them to do because of all the new shit Terran gained. But all Zerg stuff is so much later game, and like CatZ was saying that the Swarm Host is pretty good against mech, but I don't know if it's good against anything else from Terran. So I'm like, you know, ZvT in Wings of Liberty is like a pretty good matchup, right? Like it's balanced well. Like the better player normally wins. It's not perfect, but you know.
I think it favors Zerg. I think it's up to Terran to make mistakes in Wings of Liberty, and I think that's switched over in Heart of the Swarm. Like there isn't you know, like I think it's balanced in terms of win rates and whatnot. It's just fucking, I don't know. It feels like the Terran has to sneak in and do this drop, and if it doesn't do damage, you're kind of fucked. You know, that's how it feels sometimes. Of course, it's hard for the Zerg as well, but I think it's on the Terran to apply the pressure before the Zerg gets a really good army. I think that Heart of the Swarm is really similar in the sense that you have to kill the Terran, but the Terran's a lot fucking harder to kill, especially with all the new units. So I think that's where the problem is. Because if you get maxed as Terran, Kevin, you can't lose, right?
I mean,
right?
Depends what you're maxing on, but like if I have the ideal unit composition when I max, no, there's no way to lose. It's actually impossible.
Yeah.
You can just.
You're talking about against Zerg?
Yeah, I'm talking about Sky. If you are maxed,
not even Sky. Like Sky is invincible, yes, but mech ground mech is also invincible, like with Raven support.
I mean, with Raven Viking,
what beats it?
If you have enough, you
don't need Vikings. You don't need Vikings ever again.
Are you kidding?
You do not.
Yes, you do.
Thors beat Broodlords.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
No, they don't.
They do though.
No.
Yep. I promise. Raven.
That was a good argument. Good discussion,
guys. Impasse.
like they have insane range. Like it's up to like Broodlords are usually relying on position, right? And they can't against the new range of the Thor. And then you can focus fire like the Broodlords much better than they can the Thors.
And then your queens and transfuse the Thors and have fungal the Thors so they can't move out of range, and then the Broodlings kill it. I really I think the new Thor attack is really good against Broodlords. I don't think Thors alone can deal with Broodlords, and I don't think Raven support is sufficient. But I haven't tried it.
I mean, you should have like tanks as well and shit, right? Planetary fortresses probably is what you would make, right? It's just kind of impossible to attack into it. I promise you. Try it. Then there's medevac speed
boost. That's like
No, I'm complaining about everything, dude.
I see.
I'm
enjoying it.
Flattering Zerg units. But yeah, there's medevac speed boost as well, which is a free ability that turns gained, and now you don't have to lose anything ever. Like you should retain your medevacs against pretty much everything except for maybe Mutalisks, but they still outrun the Mutalisk while boosted. So you have to catch up to the medevacs, hope that they're not reinforcing, and that's the only way to kill them. If you chain fungal them, they won't die because fungal's shit now. And then the Ravens are better, right, for transitioning into the later game. They're much easier, and I like that actually, because they were kind of like hard to use before, and everyone complained about that, and it was like only Bomber did it. But yeah, I mean that's the problems that I have with Terran. Good things for Zerg. Ultralisk is fucking broken as far as facing a Terran that's going bio, but I don't think Terran should be going bio.
Ultralisks are hilarious against bio. This interaction doesn't make any sense to me. Wait,
tell me about it, because I have not seen like any pros go bio against Zerg in a long time now.
there is besides Thors kind of go 1-to-1 with Ultralisks. Besides that, there's basically no Terran unit you can build that will be cost efficient against an army of Ultralisks. And because of the Ultralisk splash,
Marauders no longer do the job.
Assuming that
Marauders never did the job. What it was is the Marines would tank, so then the Marauders would do the job. If you go pure Marauder and you sit and fight one on head on, you'll still lose the Ultralisk. It was the Marines in the front that would tank the Ultralisk damage that made Marine Marauder kind of a viable response.
So basically, the Ultralisks are like StarCraft 1 Ultralisks, where you just make a bunch and Terran bio can't do anything.
So the difference is
StarCraft, Zerg's fungal is better against kiting. So
in StarCraft 1, the Ultralisks would never die, and then they would slowly kill your army. In StarCraft 2, the Ultralisks never die, and they also kill your army instantly because they two-shot Marines.
Well, StarCraft 2 is a more fast-paced game than StarCraft 1, so that's fine. That would kill it quick. That's not my point. But well,
Yeah.
Thank God there's a Dark Storm at least for that. Oh my God.
Kind of. There's Blinding Cloud.
Which
good. Brings me to the other ridiculous unit that the Zerg has, which is the Viper. That's the only improvement that Zerg has, I feel like, against all the improvements that I just mentioned for Terran. Out of all the people that I talked to today prior to the show, which is about 10 pro gamers, the only one that said that Zerg and Terran were balanced was Moro. He's a Terran player, of course. And he said that it even favors Zerg because there's a timing where you can get Vipers out, and the Terran should not be able to stop them from blinding clouding their mech army. So he feels like this timing is imbalanced.
What composition is he talking about?
It's Roach Hydra.
Like Roach Hydra into Viper. Okay. But I mean, like, even if that was true, that's a really shitty way to balance a matchup, and it would be incredibly boring. I mean, we've seen what happens, you know, in Wings of Liberty with like CVP. I mean, like, that's not what we want, right? We want Zerg to have options, more than one timing attack that's overpowered. So
yeah, I don't really like. I think that timing is really strong, but if you know it's coming or you're expecting it, you should be able to stop it. You just need
that's what I told Mono.
Earlier Vikings and turrets in front and good spread, plus some Widow Mines helps because you can't blind and cloud them.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said. And he said that you can't take a fourth by the time it hits, so you can just contain the Terran on 3 base. I couldn't disagree with it because I haven't done it too much, but like I said, even if that was the case, even if that push was overpowered, that would still be really stupid.
But you can't revolve a matchup around one push.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, well, can you stop him before he gets to the push? I can't make that shit exciting.
Yeah.
Esports will die, so...
That's what I think the main problem with TvZ is. Terran got too many toys, like Dan said, and Zerg only has, like, one.
I think what you just said there is more important than anything else. It's like, we had a lot of units in Wings of Liberty that we either didn't think were good, or we thought were too good, and over time we kind of figured out like their more accurate power level, and it may be that these strategies are actually kind of broken and affect the game in a negative way, and they need to be changed. Maybe Reapers need to get changed in some way. Maybe Hellbats really do need that armory nerf or something, lower DPS, whatever. But fuck, where was I going with this?
I know where you were going. You want me to finish your thought? Because I know where you were going.
If you keep going, maybe I'll remember it.
Okay, so what you were trying to say is that in time, Zergs will learn to deal with these units that seem too powerful right now individually. You can continue now.
Yes, that's it. And so the issue here may not actually be...
God,
thank you, Cass.
damn.
May not actually be the strength of any one unit that's been added, but like you just said, the fact that Terran now has 4, 5, 6 additional new options, whereas Zerg has like 1.5, maybe 2. And so you end up putting all these players into a game where Terran can choose all these new things, and before you can learn, like, progression of a strategy is going to be, first someone has to learn how to do it, then someone can learn how to defend it. And so there's always going to be a lag whenever you introduce something new before the defending player is able to appropriately deal with it. And so a lot of Zergs right now, they're like, well, I know how to deal with Widow Mines, but how do I deal with Sky? Or I know how to deal with Sky, but how do I deal with Hellbats? Or I know how to deal with Hellbats, but how do I deal with Reapers? Meanwhile, Terran, it's like, how do I deal with Vipers? That's like basically it. Because the correct response to Ultralis right now is to not go bio. Boom, problem solved. Right. You make tanks, you kill them, like, it doesn't matter. You make tanks and Thors and you kill Ultralis. And maybe Swarmhost, but from what I've talked to Zergs and other Terrans, they don't seem to really be a problem in general, and I never see them. So it's like, Terran, can you deal with Vipers? Zerg is like, can you deal with fucking 8 new units that you've never seen before and have no idea how they work?
Okay, so I see your point. I've thought about it too. I was like, maybe if I figure out how to beat this, and then, you know, then how to beat that. But the problem is that if you take Wings of Liberty as a base and assume that that it's close to balance, and then compare it to Heart of the Swarm, and add the fact that Hellions are now Hellbats, which are obviously better, Reapers are obviously better, Medevacs are obviously better, Fungal is obviously worse against Mech, at least much worse. Thors are obviously better, then, you know, what the fuck? It's not about dealing with the unit. The units are just fucking better.
Yeah, and when you compare that to the balance of TvZ and StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty, it becomes like, what... that's my main thing with that matchup, is what did Zerg gain that counters what Terran gains? And I see not a single unit was buffed aside from Ultra, right? And then you have the Swarm Host, which I have no idea in that matchup, but yeah, I mean, everything's so late tech, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. With everything with Terran comes out really, really early, so it's, I don't know, I'm all for like slow changes and figuring out how things actually work, because I think I love following like everyone on Twitter and just watching the horrible frustrations, because I go through them as well while I'm playing, but it's like everyone needs to evolve and figure this shit out. It's just, even in my mind's eye, I'm having a hard time seeing how is Zerg going to figure out how to deal with all this new stuff. It feels like they're funneled into roaches so quickly, and then it's like, well, we already know how roaches are supposed to fare, so like, I don't know, it feels like a really hard thing for Zerg to actually figure all this out in the early game.
I think that's reasonable. I don't think anything you guys just said I disagree with.
Cool.
Cool.
Right.
Awesome.
Well, Dan, let's just go and cut to a break. We'll come back, talk about, because Dan, I know you want to talk about PvT, right?
I want to talk about
TvZ too,
everything. And TvZ, oh yeah, I have some theories about that stuff.
All right. When we come back, that's what we'll be talking about here on State of the Game. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.